All right, ladies and gentlemen, Pally Time back again here today. And today we're going to be doing something that I normally almost never do on my channel. And that is we're going to talk about something that doesn't really concern paladins too much. Today we're going to talk about systems, particularly game design systems. And we're going to talk about the meta. And particularly like in World of Warcraft and in general, like retail and all that kind of stuff. So what's been going on with me is I've been keeping up with the whole Kevin Jordan and the whole Asmon Gold Allcraft and whatnot, talking about like Shadowlands coming out. And for years the changes in World of Warcraft have been bothering me, and I've been listening to people a lot talk about it. And I don't know. I watched a recent Allcraft video, and I watched some Kevin Jordan videos, the Allcraft video with Kevin Jordan in it. So I guess this video is a bit of a response to Kevin Jordan and Asmongold and the rest. But when they started talking about the meta and how the meta has changed and how people have changed and all that kind of stuff, do they believe people have changed? Do they not believe people have changed? And what's this toxic? Basically, we have a toxic environment in both classic WoW to an extent, and in retail WoW to a very large extent. And people often identify this toxicity with the so-called meta. And I wanted to talk about what is actually dictating these player behaviors and how you could theoretically get around it. And you might ask, off the top of your head, what in the flying hell makes me think I'm even qualified to talk about this stuff? The answer to that is that by trade and by profession, I'm actually a socioeconomic and political philosopher. There we go. And I'm talking about, but I say by trade, socioeconomic and political philosopher. I don't mean that you make money at that kind of stuff. I mean like I have the degrees for that kind of stuff. So don't get the two things mixed up. Philosophers typically don't make money from what it is that they do. But philosophy is kind of fascinating in the sense, if you don't know what philosophy is, we're kind of the assholes who make like checks and balances. We came up with the checks and balances system. We came up with certain governmental types like democracy and socialism. You know, some of them work, some of them don't work. We came up with scientific method, civic rights, a bunch of other stuff. And generally what we're doing especially as economic and political philosophers, is our job is to analyze, how do I put this? Our job is to, if the world is not the way human beings wish it to be, our job is to try to figure out a way to design a system and then to plug human beings into that system that better achieves the goals of humanity. So, for example, the checks and balances system, the civic rights system, the way democracy works, all that kind of stuff. So we're intimately familiar with both how to make systems, and probably more importantly, like 90% of our job as political and economic philosophers is studying the nature of the human animal for the purposes of not only trying to figure out what the hell it wants, but for the purposes of trying to design systems to help navigate humanity towards achieving what it desires. And nothing can be, that's almost exactly what a video game is, believe it or not. So the other thing that somewhat qualifies me to this is I actually am a game, am I a game designer or a game developer? I think I'm both at this point. So I suppose technically I'm an aspiring game designer and a game developer, but long story short, I've got a game that is probably going to be released on Steam in like a year or so. It's currently in it's like pre-alpha production at this particular point. What I literally did was I built a tabletop version of the game I wanted to make for a video game, play tested the shit out of it with a bunch of friends, and it was good enough. I was like, hey, why don't we throw money at this and get this thing on Steam, basically. So I've spent a lot of time over the last few years converting my philosopher-based skill set into more of a game design-based skill set. And I find some of the deficiencies in classic World of Warcraft to be fascinating And basically, I just assume they're idiots and they don't know what the hell they're doing. The game devs for World of Warcraft. But then I start listening to like Kevin Jordan, and I start listening to Asmongold and the community talk about it. And it's not that I think the community is dumb. It's that I don't think they're really hitting the nail on the head quite as well as they think they are. So I'm going to throw my thoughts and my ideas into the ring. Okay, so that's basically the end of our little introduction here, which took like 5 frickin' minutes apparently. Now, this conversation is going to be a little rambling on my part because, and a lot of it is going to be, I think core chunks of it are going to be gold, like really good, and I think some of it might be shit or just other things other people have said. So, but I'm going to say my piece anyway, and so here we go. Okay, so when you're developing. Okay, let's just talk about meta and human interaction with the meta in general. So, how do I put this? The way you design your game system, specifically, and I probably should write this down, specifically, we're going to be talking about rewards and punishments. Punishments, okay? So how your game handles both its rewards and its punishments in the game, and the game should have punishments, don't get me wrong on this, when I say game, I probably should be replacing that with system. The way your system deals with rewarding and punishing the human animal that you're plugging into the system, that is literally interacting with it, is going to very much dictate how the human animal interacts with that system. Literally, it'll dictate a large chunk of the player experience. So a prime example of this would be Asmongold always brings up the Scarlet Monastery from Classic WoW example, where he basically says, hey, if you made your way all the way out to Scarlet Monastery and you find out that your tank doesn't know how to tank on the first damn pull, you're not just kicking him from the group and replacing him immediately, because you can't do that in Classic World of Warcraft. You can kick him from the group, but it's very difficult to replace anybody immediately all the way up at Scarlet Monastery. It's a really good example. And because your reward in this case for kicking him would be that you could get a better tank. You don't have to teach this guy how to tank and all that stuff. The punishment, however, for kicking him is you're going to have to wait damn near an hour probably to get another tank. Subsequently, this system design, where you've made it not easy to get another tank, right, is influencing player behavior, where suddenly they're not just going to kick that guy, and they're actually going to teach him how to tank, because it's far easier to teach a new player how to do something under those game conditions than it is to easily replace him. Flash forward to retail, where you can replace people at the drop of a hat, and suddenly, like literally, you could just kick the tank, and then you just press a button looking for tank, and probably within like 3 minutes, maybe 5 minutes at the most, you'll have another tank, and hopefully he knows what the hell he's doing, and away he goes. And if that is the player reaction that player reaction, damn, my brain died. Anyway, if that's what you want your players to be doing, then by all means that system is 110,000% viable. But if for some reason you determine that that is not the kind of actions that you want your player base to be doing, then you need to go looking back at the rewards and the punishments. Another really good example, I'll probably bring up my other tip here. Do I not have it here? Oh, fuck meta. There we go. Yeah, I have a fuck Drakova one too. It's pretty funny. No, I don't want that. Thank you. I literally want... Oh, God. Why? Why, game? Why? Can I have this? Thank you. Okay. So another really good example of the way you design your system, and then you plug in the human animal into it, and then the way your system's rewards and negatives manifest themselves are going to influence player behavior would be how difficult is the content of your game. So, for example, if your content is really difficult in the game, what you're going to end up finding is that the so-called meta is going to manifest. Meta stands for most effective tactics available. So as you can see here, I've got this is supposed to be an S here, if I recall correctly. So it's like human beings' wants have two core aspects to their nature as far as our discussion here today is concerned. The first one is that with a game, right, when I said as far as they're just concerned, I mean for the purposes of a game, they desire to have fun and or satisfaction. They also, being human beings, and this is a core trait of humanity in general. If you haven't noticed this yet, human beings really like achieving their desires easily. Like, we like achieving our desires easily, but it's not necessarily the funnest thing for us to do, and it's not necessarily the healthiest and best thing for us to do. And this is one of the most fascinating aspects of the human condition, is because we're all like biologically programmed to want to be able to do things easy, but that doesn't necessarily give us the greatest degree of fun or satisfaction, which is bizarre, but it is the way that it is. So if you're stuck with these two elements here, where human beings are wanting to both have fun and or satisfaction in their game, however they're defining that, and then they also kind of want things easy because that's the way human beings are, then we get this, combine these desires often manifest as a desire for the easiest way to have fun, to achieve fun and or satisfaction, which we already talked about. Now here's the kicker, though. In my opinion, there are many ways for those desiring to make a game harder if they want to make it harder. There's also many ways for people who want to make a game fun to make it fun. Or to be satisfied, even. The problem is that there's only one fucking way to make a game easier, and that's the so-called meta, right? Most effective tactics available. Tactics? Yeah. So, if there's only one possible way to make the game easier, then the question often that the game is proposing to the player base is, do you need to actually, how do I put this? God. Do you actually need to try to meta, to try to make the game easier? So I'll give you a primary example. It's probably best to speak in example terms. So if you're raiding difficulty, so the raids in your game or your missions or whatever the hell your game is actually doing are so difficult, right, that only a few strategies are even able to like stand a chance of achieving it, especially with the skill level of the average typical human being, then you will form meta. It's also important to know that meta is effectively an option killer. And as an option killer, often a fun goal killer, a fun/goal killer. This is also a true statement. As meta's purpose is to identify anything efficient, aka, or anything inefficient, aka anything that makes the game harder, more difficult, less easy, for the purposes of shunning it, and to identify anything maximizing efficiency for the purposes of demanding it. Okay, so meta equals option killer, and its literal purpose is to attempt to identify inefficiencies of play, and then to shun those inefficiencies for the purposes of maximizing efficiency. Okay, so the first thing you have to ask yourself, I also think of meta in a game as kind of being like a cancer. All right, since meta is effectively an option killer. And I'll talk about where I think games are at their most funnest. The answer is, I call it muddy waters, but we'll get into that. Basically, when players have the most options available to pretty much kind of do what they want the way they want to do things, that's kind of where players will have the most fun. But at the same time, you have to balance that with the difficulty of the content. So the more difficult you make content, the more you're going to push a player base towards not only forming meta, but demanding a meta. And that's when shit gets deadly and cancerous, in my opinion. Like, at first, the cancer of meta is kind of benign. Like, it just is a thing that human beings do, trying to figure out the most effective tactics available. But once they start having to demand of the player base the meta, that's when you got problems. Because once they start demanding meta of the player base, then that becomes option killer, which can also be fun and satisfaction killer for a lot of people. It also ends up making the game a lot easier, because meta by definition is purposely intended to make the game easier. And we already discussed that easy in a game does not necessarily equate to fun or satisfaction. In fact, often it's quite the opposite, despite the fact that everyone will be decrying the difficulties of the game and always asking for quality of life improvements. It's one of those things that they ask for, but they don't really... It's actually it's not that they don't want them. It's just that it's not good for them to have. Like, it doesn't make them more satisfied. It's just, Asmongold gives the example of cheat codes in a video game. It's like, wow, I really want to make this game easier. Let me use the cheat codes. How quickly do you get bored of a game after using the cheat codes? The answer is pretty damn fast, because the difficulty and the challenge basically went out of the game. Okay. So what's another example of meta that I really wanted to talk about or bring up? So to put everything I've been saying together so far, what I pointed out was that, and I should give some more examples of this, the way you design your system, okay, will dictate to a large extent the way human behavior manifests within the confines of that system, if you understand the nature of the human animal that you're trying to plug into the system. Most of this is centered around the concepts of rewards and punishments. I'll give you a really good example from the game that I'm currently designing for the way the way you go about designing your system can influence player behavior, and then you need to look at it like, okay, do we like this? Do we not like this? What is better? What is worse? So I'm going to give two examples. The first example I'm going to give is from my own development of my own game and my own game developmental experiences. And the second one we're going to talk about is the fact that World of Warcraft's faction balance has been dog shit, basically, for a long time now. Despite the fact that not only was it pretty damn well balanced back in Classic World of Warcraft, but with the re-release of Classic World of Warcraft, it still is pretty damn well balanced between the two factions, which basically it lets us very empirically evaluate, okay, what changed from point A to point B to cause this faction imbalance? Like, what changes of the system happened there? But I'll start with my own experiences with my own game design, because I think it's much more hard-hitting, even though it's probably less packed for hard-hitting for the point I'm trying to make. Okay, so in my own game design, what I basically wanted was, it's a mech-based game design, and one thing that always pissed me off about many mech-based game designs was almost all mech combat games, to my knowledge, always have me very gingerly and very carefully husbanding my forces, meaning I have to baby my mechs, and I have to baby my mech pilots. And if one of my mechs dies or one of my mech's pilots dies, it's like, oh shit, I got to restart the game and I got to play it all over again. And what I really wanted from my game is I wanted more of like an actual army type feel, and I wanted like a tabletop Warhammer 40k feel where two armies are being thrown into each other. Casualties are being happened on both sides. Both sides are getting the absolute shit kicked out of them, but nobody feels the need to quit because none of that really matters, right? So it's like, okay, yeah, I lost 80% of my forces, but I won the battle. Thumbs up, I'm a happy camper. I wanted that kind of experience with battle mechs. I also wanted the experience of fighting tooth and nail, like when I'd play in a tournament back in the day, like fighting tooth and nail to the death with my opponent. Like, I'm losing, but I'm going to take as many of you motherfuckers with me as I possibly can. I'm going to do as much damage to my opponent as I possibly can. I'm going to deny him as many points as I possibly can. I'm going to collect as many points for myself. I'm going to perform at my best, despite the fact that I'm getting my absolute ass handed to me. And when I was looking at my game system designs, it dawned on me that if I use the traditional all or nothing, again, we're back to the rewards and punishment thing. If I use a traditional rewards and punishment systems, which is like an all or nothing system, and a good example of this would be like Hearthstone, that you guys are probably familiar with. So in Hearthstone, if you win a match, you are rewarded, and if you lose a match, you're basically not given anything. Reward-wise. You could argue that you leave and lose stuff if you lose a match. But what this basically meant was that particular all or nothing reward system generates certain kinds of metas. And you have to understand that you can change that up a bit. So like in Hearthstone, for example, zoo decks are a huge meta. Like, I don't know how they are now. I haven't played Hearthstone in a long time. Back in the day, zoo decks were a huge meta because of how the reward and the punishment system worked. It's like, yeah, I liked playing Paladin decks, and I would have like 40-minute games with Paladin decks, and I would barely lose a 40-minute game with a Paladin deck, and I really enjoyed myself until I noticed that I made almost no headway in whatever my goal outside the actual match was. Like, you know, I'd only been rewarded as if I'd won. I only was punished as if I'd lost one game, but I was also only rewarded as if I'd lost one game, which means I wasn't rewarded at all. Meanwhile, by comparison, you could play zoo decks, and in a 40-minute time period, you could probably have like let me think, 10 minutes a game. Yeah, you could probably have like 6 or maybe about 5 or 6 or even 7 games with zoo decks. Win, lose, or draw, your rewards rate, even like 50% win, lose, or draw, your reward rate would be substantially higher than these damn 40-minute games. So the point is that there was and of course this developed a meta where you saw zoo decks all over the damn place because win, lose, or draw, zoo decks were just the fastest way by far to get the most rewards out of playing Hearthstone. And I remember having a bad taste in my mouth about the all or nothing reward system. The other negative about the traditional all or nothing reward system is that it greatly incentivizes the player to leave the game when they're getting their butt kicked, right? So the player might just, like, let's say there's, in my game, for example, there's 2 armies clashing. One player is getting absolutely slaughtered. It's very clear that he's about to get a completely raped, basically, by the other opponent. And the next thing, how do I put this? Yeah, so he's about to get his butt kicked, and he's probably just like, I'm just going to leave the game, right? Like, you know, screw this, I'm out. I'm just going to leave the game. Whatever. I'll take my loss. Blah 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 blah. That player experience is contradictory to what I wanted out of my game in the first place. Like, I have very clear vision about the game, and I want people fighting tooth and nail right to the bitter end, basically giving the other person the middle finger as he kills you and obliterates your army. So what this means is I need to develop a reward and a punishment system in order to generate this type of player reaction, because it's not natural for human beings to want to stay in a game where they're not only assured to win, but lose. They're assured to lose, but they're quite more than likely going to lose rather harshly. So I threw out the concept of a all or nothing reward system, and I decided that for my game, what I was going to instill was a reward system that both rewarded a player for how many forces he... it's still in development, right? Don't get me wrong. This isn't the definitive one, so I can probably think of ways to tweak it to make it better. But off the top of my head, a vastly superior reward and punishment system would be, for what I'm trying to achieve, would be that you're rewarded for what value of your forces are remaining on the field at the end of the match. So, for example, let's say I had there were 2 players and they both have like 100 points worth of army. We'll just throw out a random number there. One person wins with 50% of their forces remaining. The other guy got completely killed. All right. One player would be rewarded for about 150 points, right? He's got 50 points of his army remaining. Awesome, I'm rewarding him for remaining forces, and I'm rewarding him for all the forces that he took out from his opponent. Whereas the guy who lost the battle would be rewarded like 50 points. Because even though his entire army got smashed to pieces, he still managed to incur some damage on his opponent. And in warfare, that's kind of a thing. Sometimes that is a win condition. A Pyrrhic victory is still technically a victory. And a Pyrrhic victory is still technically you got mauled, son, if you're on the winning side. So I decided that just this simple change to the reward system would steer player behavior more in the direction that I wanted them in, which is now I'm incentivizing you to actually stay in the game, to fight tooth and nail with your opponent, and to try to take out as many of them as possible, because I'm literally rewarding you for everything you kill, right? And then you basically is what I'm basically saying. And the point I'm trying to make here is, very cleverly through system design and through reward and punishment design of your game, you can actually influence and dictate player behavior. The other thing, and this gets really interesting when you talk about whatever the hell the meta is. So now we'll move into the World of Warcraft example with faction imbalance. So for a long time now, Horde, I guess, has been way more popular than the Alliance. I've heard tales that sometimes Blizzard tries to fix this, but they end up like going wildly in the other direction, which ends up being like Horde is like 80% the population, and then my bad. Like it starts out with like Horde being 80%, Alliance being 20%, and then it shifts to like Alliance being 80% and Horde being 20%. And meanwhile, I'm looking at Classic over here, which even to this day, back in the day, they got it right, and even to this day, they've gotten it right. And you have to ask yourself, well, what the hell is the difference in the design philosophy that's even causing this to happen? And when you start breaking it down, I probably should slow down my speech for a bit here. When you really break it down, in my personal opinion, one thing that really dictates the meta. So what is meta? Meta is there's only one way to make the game easier, and that is meta. And we have meta is effectively an option killer, and yeah, blah, 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 blah. The whole purpose of meta is to identify inefficiencies for the purposes of shunning them, and identifying the most efficient things to do for the purposes of demanding them. Okay, that is what meta is. So the first thing you have to ask yourself is, why the fuck is your game so hard, H-A-R-D, that it's forcing people to manifest a meta? It's literally forcing people to try to not only figure out a meta, because all human beings will always try to figure out a meta to a game. Like that is also an aspect of human nature. Human nature is to go into a game and try to figure out the most effective tactics possible. But just because they're figuring out the most effective tactics possible doesn't mean they have to use them. And I'll give you a primary example of this. So as we saw from the classic WoW community from the private servers, the classic WoW community from the private servers are not only quite toxic, they are actually kind of like meta-religious. I would literally call them meta-religious. They're not even meta-slaves. They're like meta-religious. It's like Omni, Padre, meta. It's like, Jesus Christ, you guys. But people assume that the player base has changed, right? They're like, oh, the player base has changed, blah, blah, blah. No. That's not what happened. Okay, that's not what's happening. Human beings are the same as they've always been. If you want proof of this, we have evidence of Kevin Jordan. There we go. We have evidence of Kevin Jordan in one of his videos back in All Crap before Classic even launched, where he's talking about how if they had a DPS class that was doing 10% less DPS than the other DPS classes, then nobody would want to play it. And this is back in the day in classic World of Warcraft. And the point I'm trying to make here is we have evidence from even way back when, probably a lot of evidence if you really break it down, that people were still pretty interested in what the most effective tactics possible were, even back in the day. And if I had to break down why human beings are so interested in doing that, particularly in a game like World of Warcraft, it would have to be that the people who are the most interested in finding the meta and performing at the highest level. Some people just like doing it, don't get me wrong. Some people just like being on the top and they think they're awesome and blah, 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 and it's an ego trip, and go for it. Have fun. Do your thing. But a lot of them in classic World of Warcraft, and I think in retail too, are trying to use it so that they can make the argument that they deserve the best gear because they're the best performer. And hence why they're so addicted to being a meta slave, kind of a thing. But that's kind of a side point, neither here nor there. And personally, I'd like to get back on track with what I was talking about previously. Starting to wonder if I even have an aircon turned on in here. Did I just turn? No, you're on. You're just not doing your damn job. Weird. Okay. Guess I'll turn one on then. All right, so where was I? I think I was talking about faction balance, what causes a meta. Yeah, I was asking, why is your game so damn hard? So if you make your game super hard, then your player base is going to ever more lean meta. Because the only fucking way to make anything easier in a game is to find the meta and demand by the people you're playing with that it be implemented. You literally demand that other human beings do the meta. Otherwise, we will not play with you because this game is too fucking hard. Okay, or this game is basically hard. And you can kind of see that from the classic WoW private server community. So when I talk to people from the classic WoW private server community, they always talk about how private server raids are way more difficult than actual retail classic raids are. And you can see very clearly why that would form a meta type culture on the classic WoW private server, because again, the difficulty is hard enough to demand that the only way to make it easier is to go meta, and so subsequently they start demanding the meta, and that's where things become cancerous, is when they start demanding it, right? Like meta not only will always exist, and it should always exist in a well-balanced game. Like, you don't want such an evenly balanced game that everything is technically the meta, because that's really bad game design. I agree with Kevin Jordan, there we go, on all of that, and I agree with Asmongold on all of that, 110,000%. But if your game is too fucking hard, man, meta's going to take over, and it's going to be cancerous ass, because meta is option killer, and when you start killing people's options, you start killing their fun and their satisfaction. And as we talked about before, this is not always the best. Okay, so I think I've kind of somewhat proven that I'm not too far off base with what I'm trying to say here. Okay, so let's go back to the faction imbalance between the Horde and the Alliance that Blizzard seems to have had right back in classic World of Warcraft, but they can't seem to get right in retail. You could look at many different reasons why A, B, and C are happening, but I think what it really breaks down to is you need to have an incentive for people to both, again, we're going back to that damn rewards and punishments thing. So you need to have an incentive for people to want to join both factions, right? One faction cannot be significantly better than the other faction as far as its racials and abilities are concerned. Otherwise, that faction will just naturally have more people. And from what I can see in MMOs, more people on a given side, especially in MMOs, tends to act kind of like gravity, which is like the more mass something has means it tends to generate more mass. So like very rapidly, a 60-40 imbalance will turn into like a 70-30 imbalance, for example. It doesn't continue into oblivion, but it's just kind of like, oh, everybody's playing over there, and my friends are over there, or my girlfriend's over there, or oh shit, I gotta go over there, kind of a thing. The other problem, again, is if your content is too damn hard. Well, if your content is so hard that the player base is going meta, and they're demanding the fucking meta, because the meta is the only way to make things easier, and the Horde have the best racials for the purposes of achieving a meta, guess what's going to happen. Like, it's not fucking rocket science here. The meta will be go Horde over Alliance, or the meta will be go Alliance over Horde. Okay, so what are some of the solutions? Well, you could argue that one place to always look for a solution for killing meta is your content too hard? Right? Because if your content is too hard, then meta will be the only real way to go. The more you lower the difficulty of your game content, the more meta will still exist, but it's simply not viable. And you can really see this in retail classic WoW. In retail classic WoW, the private server community comes over. The private server community has experienced a much harder game than what we will eventually be delivered, and they were very meta oriented. Like, everything was meta in classic World of Warcraft. Classic World of Warcraft meta. But then as we began, we just seen AQ40, so at this point the game might as well all be over. But nothing in World of Warcraft is really anywhere near difficult enough to warrant us being meta slaves. And so you can probably see the classic WoW community over time. It probably already has, but you'll see it more and more so over time. They'll become less and less meta slaves and much more accepting of random people and just all kinds of other weird things like boomkins and ret paladins and spell proc on hit dual wielding hunters, spell proc on hit paladins, spell proc on hit dual wielding rogues. I guess rogues are always dual wielding, but whatever, you get the point. So all that weird shit that people usually scoff at, or the private server community scoffs at, will start coming back into the game just because the everything is so much easier as far as clearing the content is concerned that you don't need to be demanding of the meta. It gets even more fascinating when you look at what the true difficulty of Classic WoW raiding is. The true difficulty of Classic WoW raiding is getting warm bodies basically every week. And a lot of times, some of the bosses in there, you have to have even competent warm bodies. Like, I'm thinking of Cthulhu, for example. Fireballs, some semi-competent warm bodies. Cthulhu is a big check on competency. If you guys are still stuck on Cthulhu, the easiest thing to do is make sure your DPS, your mana-based DPS from Phase 1 to Phase 2, spirit regens during Phase 1 before they get into Phase 2. Make sure that your mana-based DPS going from Phase 1 to Phase 2 is entering Phase 2 with 80% mana or more, and I swear to God, it'll make the fight a million times easier. Alright, moving on here. So number one, is your content too hard? Is that what's causing this damn meta thing to manifest? And immediately look for reducing the difficulty, and for trying to figure out other forms of difficulty that would not demand or dictate meta. The problem with lowering difficulty, however, is you can only lower difficulty so much before you start affecting other aspects of the game negatively. So again, we go back to this. Yeah, people want it easy, but it's not good for them if they have it easy. I'm borderline trying not. I'm straight up trying not to say you think you do, but you don't. But in this case, I'm pretty sure it's true. When some people say they want it easy, it is true to say you think you do, but you don't. But the truth is, just because you don't want a game easy doesn't mean you want it so fucking hard that you're so limited on your options for playing the game because you have to adhere to the fucking meta. Fuck you. Anyways, moving on. So back to the faction balance thing. Straight up, no joke, I think the most effective way to achieve faction balance in World of Warcraft is to have incentives, rewards, purpose, value to both factions being played at the same time, possibly for different reasons. So I'll give you an example that Classic WoW does. The Classic WoW does this, and the other factions do not. Or the retail games that came after it, the expansions, did not do this. And that is, what if, say, one faction, such as the Horde, in this particular case, has the racials that make PvP. They have God mode PvP racials, but their racials are kind of shit in PvE. All right, so they're the racials that if you're doing PvP, holy fuck, the Horde got the racials, which is kind of how Classic WoW is. The Alliance, on the other hand, are the faction where their racials aren't that great in PvP, but their racials are much, much better served for PvE. Right? Now, this type of balancing, of course, would not work if your raid content or your endgame content is still so fucking hard that you're basically forcing people to meta. So if you're forcing people to meta, then in that scenario, the Alliance would be the faction that everybody gravitates towards, because despite the fact that Horde has all the PvP racials, you got to get your fucking gear, right? So, you might as well go there. You'll be less potent in PvP from the racial perspective, but at least you're better geared. Now, if your raids aren't hard enough to warrant people being a meta slave, then this type of dichotomy between, Horde has the PvP racials and Alliance has the PvE racials should generate a rather strong dichotomy between the factions. Like, there's strong enough incentive there, theoretically, to actually make people want to play both the Horde and the Alliance. And I think this is exactly how Classic World of Warcraft... This is one of the main reasons why Classic World of Warcraft achieves its parity between the Horde and the Alliance. That parity being that... yes, the Alliance has shit PvP racials, but from a PvE standpoint, their racials are just as good, if not better, than the majority of the Horde. I'm bringing up like melee, from a melee and a caster perspective. They're either on parity or they're better. So, for example, Orcs, Axe, specialization skills, and humans, mace and sword specialization skills are a big fucking deal for your PvE performance if you're a melee. And then the Alliance have some really good caster racials. The Horde have some, let me think off the top of my head. Some people might say troll, some people might say orc, but the truth is the Horde don't really have that great of caster racials from a PvE perspective, in my opinion. But again, the content's not hard enough to warrant being a meta slave in that particular fashion, so it really doesn't matter. By far the biggest difference people talk about between the two, however, is paladins, and the fact that paladins come with a blessing of salvation that they can put on the entire raid, reduces threat by 33%. It's kind of bullshit and overpowered. Not technically overpowered, but it makes it so that the Alliance have way easier time managing their threat, and the Horde have to work quite... The Horde have found a way to definitely manage their threat if they're topping the DPS meters, but they're not even topping the DPS meters. It's so weird. Like, I'm not even sure what the Horde are doing over there, but I'm not sure if the Horde have to throttle themselves on their DPS because they have threat issues. But they're on the stats say they're on parity with the Alliance, so I can only assume that they're having to throttle themselves, especially since the melee over there get the fucking Wind Fury Totem, which in theory the Wind Fury Totem should cause them to do way more damage, but because they're not a Blessing of Salvation, they have to throttle and get fucked. So, anyways, so the point I'm trying to make here is Classic World of Warcraft achieves its balance, in my opinion, between the two factions, because one faction is technically better at PvE, or at the very least way easier, right? So it's way softer on the meta. You don't have to be anywhere near a meta slave on the Alliance side compared to the Horde side. Horde side, you probably have to be a bit more meta-focused, just because your life is more difficult without blessing of I keep saying salvation. Is it salvation? Yeah, salvation. So your life is way easier on the Alliance side. So if you want to do the PvE stuff, then yeah, definitely go Alliance. And that's kind of a big reason for a lot of people going Alliance, is they're just interested in the PvE. They don't really care about the PvP. And so they're going to pick the faction where they can not only have the easiest time doing the content, because this is human nature, right? The desire to do things easily. But they also don't theoretically have to be a meta slave. Because, yeah. Meanwhile, if you're more of a PvP-oriented kind of person, you might put up with all the rating meta nonsense in order to get your gear, and then just have the better racial, and then just be a god in PvP. Not overpoweredly so, but, you know, definitely, I don't know, man, the ability to shrug off fear with Will of the Forsaken, or to increase your DPS temporarily, or don't get me started on Shadow Priest, Troll Shadow Priest racial ability. Holy fuck, that thing is bullshit. You put that on any other class, holy god. So the overall point I'm trying to make here is both factions have very distinct incentives for people to join them that certain player desires and certain player psychological types are going to want to join. If you're a PvPer, you typically go Horde. If you're a PvEer, then you typically go Alliance, and this very rapidly causes the player base to be not only split, but more evenly split. I tried to think about other options. Other options were you could try a class-based split, where it's like, oh, you want to play a Warlock class? Well, the human racial is way better for Warlocks than any other racial. And it's like, oh, well, you want to play a warrior? Well, the orc racials are way better, both in like PvE and PvP, than any other type. And you try like a class split that way. Like, oh, you really want to play a warrior? You want to be a really fucking good warrior? Okay, go play an orc. Or you want to be a good mage? Go play human. You could try it that way, but then you run into some other problems. Whereas the other method is a bit more cleaner. The other one that I really find fascinating, which they kind of messed up on, in my personal opinion, is classic World of Warcraft, because they messed up on this in Burning Crusade, but I'll just point it out there. If you're playing the Horde, you look like a fucking monster. Okay? Classic WoW, you're playing the Horde, you are ugly as fuck. A lot of people don't want to be ugly as fuck. They can't deal with that, especially girls. And I thought it was fascinating when Kevin Jordan talked about how the whole reason why they put in Blood Elf Paladins into classic World of Warcraft was, or not classic, into Burning Crusade, was because I guess people were bitching that there wasn't like a beauty character on like the supposedly bad side, so that their girlfriends they could play with their girlfriends, because otherwise, you know, you try to get your girlfriend into the game, or your wife or whatever, and she's like, I don't want to look like no fucking ugly ass troll, or no cow, or whatever the hell an orc female is. It's more man than machine, I'm telling you. But yeah, so they were like, no, I want to be a pretty girl. And it's like, okay, well, if that case, we got to go play Alliance. And so not only were a lot of the women kind of pigeonholed into playing the Alliance, which boo-hoo to them, I guess, but they dragged their boyfriends over there as well. Well, when you put, you know, the literal Barbie dolls, the literal plastic Barbie dolls into the Horde side, guess which way that incentive's going to swing. Like, oh, do I be a human female, or do I be a literal fucking Barbie doll? It's like, oh, okay, fantastic. Good game balance there, you guys. Another example of this would be apparently in Burning Crusade, right? Burning Crusade. Apparently in Burning Crusade on the private servers, the faction imbalance is terrifying. It's like 80% Horde, 20% Alliance levels of terrifying, like retail levels of terrifying. And when you start looking at the changes that take place between classic World of Warcraft faction design to Burning Crusade faction design, you can start seeing all the things I just talked about getting chucked into the trash bin. It's like, oh, you want to play Horde, you have to look ugly? Nope, we got the fucking Barbie dolls now. If you play Horde, you're gonna have the PvP racials, but you're gonna be less. You're gonna have a harder time, and therefore have to be more meta oriented. In the PvE side of things, is like, no, because they get fucking paladins now. Right? Not only does the Horde get paladins, they get a better version of the paladin with like think it's like Seal of Blood or Seal of Corruption or some shit that did a metric crap ton of damage. And on top of that, we're giving the Alliance Shamans, which kind of adds nothing to the Alliance whatsoever, like, period. Like, it doesn't change the faction balance whatsoever. It's like, we have Shamans now. Woo! Meanwhile, the Horde get fucking Paladins and Blessing of Salvation Aura. Are you fucking kidding me? It just changes the nature of the game. On top of that, they did very little to the racials between each faction to even disincentivize, or to even incentivize maintaining of the faction. The point is that in Classic WoW, you have two incentive systems, both pulling and tugging for different reasons, but with very, very equal numerical force as far as the population is concerned. It's like, well, 50% want to go this way and 50% want to go that way, right? You have two incentive systems, two reward and punishment. You're allowed to have fucking punishments in your game. It's a really big deal to have punishments. Remember the SM example that Asmon keeps bringing up? Right? You don't get rid of that fucking warrior. You teach him how to tank because it's going to be a fucking hour before you fucking get another one. Right? Or the one thing that really pissed me off in retail, and the reason why I don't really like playing retail at all, is you wipe once in a 5-man dungeon, everyone just leaves. They're just gone. It's like, yeah, I can replace them kind of easily, but it really feels kind of sickening that they just leave. I'm like, what the fuck? Dude, at least stay and take your licks. Let's do this thing. Meanwhile, in Classic World of Warcraft, is there a punishment for just leaving an instance? I'm like, yeah. Well, first off, I guess it also doesn't help that you can be complete assholes in retail. Like, my experience with a wipe in retail is we wipe. People don't even wait around to hear anybody say anything. They just fucking leave. And for a long time, I was like, okay, what is happening? And then it dawned on me that this system of so easily being able to replace people probably means that the player community can be far more vitriolic and kind of brutal to one another for doing things wrong. Like, you can cuss somebody out and be like, you suck at your class. What are you doing? You're a fucking dumbass. Blah, 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 blah. I'm kicking you from the party. Go and install the game. Then you kick them out, right? So they're not even waiting around for that shit. They're just leaving. Meanwhile, in Classic World of Warcraft, you're in Scarlet Monastery and dumbass over there gets you wiped. Let's say dumbass is me. I'm dumbass. Often I am dumbass. Dumbass gets you fucking wiped. You might want to tell him he's a fucking dumbass to his dumbass fucking face. You can't. Can't do it. Why? Because it'll take you about half an hour to replace that fucker. So you might as well just, like, help dumbass not be a dumbass so you can clear the dungeon. The other punishment system that's really fascinating with this is that is the run back mechanic. So it's like, yeah, the content in Classic World of Warcraft is really easy. However, despite it therefore it's not theoretically challenging. However, despite it not being challenging, if you wipe in a dungeon, the punishment compared to retail WoW is far more severe. So again, you both want rewards in your game, and you want mechanics that punish and therefore influence certain player behavior. But anyways, let's get back to the meta before I go rambling off on that too much. Yeah, so in Retail Classic WoW, you have two equal forces from a numerical standpoint, both pulling very distinctly on the player base for their attention, right? And again, they want these two things here. They want to have fun and or find satisfaction, and they want things to be easy. So you're a PvEer. Which faction is for you? That's the fucking Alliance, baby. You're going to be the fucking allies. You want a PvP? Which faction is for you? It's going to be the fucking Horde. Have you seen their racials? Their racials are fucking bullshit. Yes, you're not going to have an easy time of raiding, but you're a good player. You're a PvPer. You can go do that. You're not afraid of that shit. You might have to be meta in raid, but oh well, whatever. I get my PvP racials. I get to be a god in Battlegrounds because of it. It's perfect. And then when you step away from that with all the other iterations, you start making the content too hard. So suddenly you're demanding the meta. So if they made content far harder in classic World of Warcraft, suddenly people would probably gravitate more towards the Alliance than they would start gravitating towards the Horde, because, you know, you got to get your gear if these raids are really hard. Somebody please give us Blessing of Sanctuary, that kind of a scenario. Which I think back in the day people bitched about. They bitched about Paladins having Blessing of Sanctuary, Salvation for like a million years. And they were like, boo hoo 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 hoo. Yeah, I know. Probably still recording, so whatever. Recording? Yeah, okay. The meta. I'm actually going to pause the video for a sec, and I'll be right back. I also forgot what the hell I was going to talk about, but I got to the bathroom. I've been talking for almost an hour. Damn, man, that sucks. Anyways, I'll be right back. Okay, should be back in recording. Awesome. Alright, so I remembered exactly what the fuck I wanted to talk about next. And oh boy, if I had a strong alcoholic drink, I would take a strong alcoholic drink right now, but I have water, so this is what we're going to do. Okay. What I want to talk about now is item score and the ease at which you allow your players to have access to certain informations. All right. So what I'm about to say is a little bit debatable, but personally, I have found over the course of the years that I have the most fun in games under a condition of balance that I like to call muddied waters, meaning that there are many different options and many different things for me to explore in an attempt to find things that are broken and overpowered and eventually may or may not become the meta. So there's a lot of different things to explore. I am not given anywhere near enough information for it to be very clear to me what is better than what. And this is what I call muddied waters. So rather than the waters being crystal clear, being very clear what is good and what is bad, I am either A, given jack shit, fuck all, very little information, and or the game is so interestingly balanced in such weird and creative ways that with weird and creative items and weird and creative gear and weird and creative mechanics that nobody's talking about with your characters and your classes that you have to explore and find out. Again, the information, I think information denial for your player base is a big issue, is a big deal. You actually don't want to give your player base anywhere near as much information as they often do these days, like stats and statistics on weapons or this and that or this item or what's going on here or what's going on there. Try to give them as little fucking information as possible. It's what I'm doing in my game, the way I'm designing it. And one of the reasons for this is because it gives an entire ocean of possibility for the player base to try to sift through, right? So they get to be explorers. Not only do individual players get to be explorers because the waters are fucking muddy and they can't find the information anywhere, but the people who like do a bunch of sims and they do a bunch of like, you know, playtesting and all that kind of stuff, even they are going to be lost for like a million years if the game has deep enough and muddy enough waters. A good example of an item that really, really fucking muddies the waters would be the Druid shape-shifting helm that gives you like energy back. It's like 60 energy or something every time you shape-shift from like a human form to cat form. And it took us like, I don't know how long to figure out that item is technically like bis for a feral druid until like halfway through Wrath of the Lich King. Like literally 2 expansions later, this thing is still debatable as to whether or not you should be wearing it, and you first encounter it at like level 40 or some shit. Like, holy crap, what is this item, bro? That kind of stuff. Need more water. Okay, so let's talk about the consequences of giving your player base more information. So my overall assessment is that human beings have not changed. Okay, the very nature of the beast that is human beings have not changed. People, game designers may or may not have gotten better at their craft. In recent times, we might be in a slump as to the actual quality of the craft of game designers. That might actually be a thing. They might be forgetting things like rewards and punishments for the purposes of pushing and dictating player behavior within their game. But one thing that can absolutely not be denied as we continue to advance further and further in the information age is that it's much more difficult now to keep to keep a game's waters muddy, right? It's very easy to give a player base a bunch of options, very difficult to balance a bunch of options, and it's also getting more and more difficult to keep those waters muddy, what with all the simming and social media and all that kind of stuff. Naturally, I think some aspects that go into keeping the waters muddy is how much do they have to meta? Right? Do they have to try to find a way to make things... Is your game so hard that these fuckers have to meta? Right? Because if they have to meta, then they're going to dig through that muddy water like a motherfucker looking for some way to min-max. Like, there's going to be a campaign to find a way to min-max and find the meta as quickly as humanly possible because you basically push them to do it. So they're going to go try to do it. But if the game is easier, they're not going to have to do it. So it might take them years or even a decade to figure out that shit is actually better to do this way than it is to do that way. And that's, in my opinion, is a lot of fun. Right, so difficulty affects it. The availability of information also affects it. And this is where we get into the concept of like item score and gear score. So... a good example would be Classic World of Warcraft. Ain't nobody ever asked you about your fucking gear in Classic World of Warcraft. It doesn't happen. It doesn't even really happen. Maybe it happens in like some raids. Like if you try to step into AQ40 in like full tier 1 gear, they might, like as a paladin, from a paladin perspective, they might accept you just because they need a warm body, right? So that's kind of cool. But if they don't need a warm body, they might look at your gear and be like, "Oh, bro, we can't do this." If you're in like Blackwing Lair, level raid healer bis or whatever, they might take you. But a lot of times you just need a warm body. But the point is, the tools are not in the game in Classic WoW for the player base to very easily, back to that word again, easy, we like easy, but it's not good for us, to very easily try to grade a person's capabilities, right? How easy is it for a player base to examine another human being and to try to assess their worth? The more difficult that is to do, the more likely it is better for the player base. Now, it is unclear to me, personally, right? And we could have this debate, I suppose. It is unclear to me at this time which is the more destructive element, okay? Like, is it the fact that people can see our gear scores that is the cancerous ass? Or is it the fact that we're so easily fucking replaceable in the dungeons and the 5-man groups that is the cancerous ass? Which one of these is the more cancerous ass? And when I look at Classic World of Warcraft, what I basically see is we technically have the ability to look at each other's item scores, right? Like a person, my tank shows up at Scarlet Monastery, I can inspect his bitch ass and I can look at his gear, right? If he's wearing dog shit gear, I'm still going to keep him. And the problem is that I'm going to try to make it work. And the reason why I'm going to try to make it work is because, one, the game isn't difficult enough for me to not try to make it work, to demand that I meta, right? And two, I can't replace him that easily. So we're probably going to go with this fucking warrior who's still in greens and has no blues. Like, that's what's going to happen. And hasn't updated his greens for like 10 levels. We're going to try to make this work. So in my personal opinion, I think the ease of replacement is the more cancerous ass to the community and to player behavior than it is the actual item score itself. However, I have been in the experience where you're actually forming the group, right? Like, you're actually forming a group. They're like, hey, we need a tank for Scarlet Monastery. Who wants to go to Scarlet Monastery? And you're like, I want to go to Scarlet Monastery, and they're like, cool, what's your item level? Now, the fact that they can ask the player base what the fuck their item level is, and they can easily check their item level, like that information is readily available to them. And I'm not even sure the content in retail often is even difficult enough to warrant fucking needing that, but they'll pick Billy at 111 over Timmy at 110, right? Item level. And this is natural human behavior. Right? It's natural human behavior that if you give them two options of going with the guy who's got, like, let's say two warriors have the exact same gear, but like one guy's got like a mildly better sword than the other one, and you get to pick between them. Guess which one you're picking? You're going with the guy who has the better sword. Like, just period, end of story. And this is human nature, and you have to ask yourself, is this, how do I put this? Is this an aspect of human nature that we want to incentivize and encourage, and God forbid, even empower to manifest itself in our player base? If the answer is yes, this is a human behavior that we want to manifest in our game and to affect our player base's experience, then by all means develop a system to interact with the animal to get the desired effect. If it is not the way you want it, then you need to try to crush that shit either with rewards or punishments. Classic World of Warcraft is very good at this. It punishes the fuck out of you for being picky on who you take just about anywhere. Like, it is brutally punishing to be picky, because you'll be like, it'll take you like half an hour to get a group together. There's no fucking group finder. Nobody asks anybody about their fucking gear because the content usually isn't difficult enough to warrant it. You finally get out to the dungeon, and then, because you can't inspect anybody's item level or anything, the first time you'll even see their gear is usually when you're out of the dungeon together. You'll notice that Billy over there we're doing strat undead, and Billy's like all in green still, like under leveled, 10 levels too low for him, fucking greens. And somebody might say, our mage is terrifyingly undergeared, and it's like, whatever, we'll be advised, whatever, we'll try to make it work. And you'll just go and try to make it work, because again, the game punishes you for having the natural human tendency of trying to replace a person. Like, oh, this guy sucks, let's try to get a better one. If you can't do that easily, because again, let's go back. What are human beings interested in? Right? Fun and or satisfaction, achievement thereof, as easy as fucking possible. If it's easier to go with Billy than it is to fucking replace Billy, guess what the fuck you're doing? And if it's easier to, how do I put this? If you can see Billy's item level even before he shows up at the dungeon, and then and he's easily replaceable either at the dungeon or in the dungeon or at the dungeon, in the dungeon, or before you even invite him to the group to even go to the dungeon, then Billy's not getting carried, man. Billy is not getting his carry on. That's not going to happen. And then you have to ask yourself, is this player behavior something you want to manifest via your rewards and your punishment system? And I personally think the answer is fuck, hell, and no. I hate the idea in the game that people can very, very easily see and assess your gear in retail WoW. They can see your fucking item level. They can easily replace you. This is going to manifest all kinds of player behavior that you might want to think, more importantly, player experiences. Player experiences that you might want to think twice about, right? So again, you're not yelling at Billy when he fucks up, right? When Billy's DPS is shit and you wipe because Billy DPS is shit, you're not yelling at Billy because you can't fucking replace Billy. And then you're just kind of like, well, you know what? We'll just teach Billy to do a little bit better. He was casting Blizzard on a single target boss when he should be doing a fucking Frostbolt. Let's teach this mage how to spam some fucking Frostbolts. You're not going to yell at him. You're not going to bitch at him. You're not even going to complain too much. You're going to be like, secretly, you might want to strangle fucking Billy. But you're going to teach Billy because what is the rule? Easy is king. And if the easiest thing to do, how do I put this? If the easiest way for you to achieve your fun and or satisfaction is to engage in a healthy manner with your fellow fucking humanity, then congratulations, you have probably achieved good MMO design. And if you have failed to achieve this, if the more healthy thing to do is something that, or the more easy and quickest way to achievement is to be a dick, basically, and treat Billy like he's an expendable piece of shit and kick him out and replace him super easily, that's what's going to happen. Okay, so I'm going to pause and try to read the rest of this and see if I covered it all. I might be about out for saying stuff, but I just want to check. Alright, I looked at it, and there's not too much more I want to talk about. But a few things, I always say that, and then I talk like for another half an hour. I wanted to touch a bit more on the concept of muddied waters and the concept of... I kind of wanted to wrap things up into a conclusion and tie things up a bit more. So, the first I'll start with the conclusion. So the conclusion is that human nature has not changed. I can tell you that definitively as a political philosopher, studied humanity over the histories. Human nature has definitely not changed. These core aspects, these two things right here, tend to be a big part of basically everything that we do. Human beings have a great deal, a great number of things that we desire. In fact, I would call humanity an omniistic desiring entity. We desire a great number of things, a lot of which can conflict with each other, right? Like if I desire to be both a good person and I desire to be a bad person, those two things kind of conflict, so I kind of have to pick and choose. And part of being the human experience is we're adrift in this vast ocean of desire, all these things that we want. We're limited by time, we're limited by resources, and we're limited by the very nature of those desires themselves. And so as we get older and mature and we go through life, we're forced to pick and choose basically what is us? Like what's more important to us to achieve, and what's less important? What do we desire not sufficiently enough so we can let it fall by the wayside? And this also kind of manifests itself in games where you start off with a desire. The desire is usually to have fun or to achieve something, just go do you. But also part of our nature is to try to figure out the easiest way possible. This has never fucking changed. If you haven't noticed, human beings can be rather ruthless in their pursuit of both fun and satisfaction and achieving their desires, and also in their pursuit of easiness. If the whole purpose of a system, at least from a philosopher's perspective, right, is if base human nature and conditions are found to be insufficient to achieve something, you then take the human animal and you plug them into a system of man-made design. And the whole purpose of the system is to incentivize and adjust human behavior to be more towards its desired effect. So, for example, in a political system, or take like law and order system, like judicial, law enforcement, police officers, that kind of stuff. Human beings for a long time have decided that just letting human beings run around in complete anarchy and being able to do whatever they want is not an ideal situation. Therefore, we should get together and form this system to try to keep things more the way human beings would want them, which apparently is insufficient in our natural state. A good example of things that are seemingly sufficient in a natural state that human beings don't touch too much would be like the nuclear family, for example. Human beings just, you can say it's culturally, but human beings just kind of naturally, biologically gravitate towards the nuclear family, which you can see it in just about every animal that there is besides human beings. So if human beings are animals and animals are animals and the animals do it, and then make why question why human beings also do it would be my argument. Human beings don't tend to mess with the nuclear family system, even though it's tyrannical as a motherfucker, because it works. And because it works and it seems to be decently moralistic, then we just roll with it. But in situations where things are found to be insufficient in their natural human state, then we tend to develop systems. Now, in a video game, right, the whole point of a fucking video game is your life is boring, not fun, and lacking satisfaction. Therefore, we're going to design a system and put your happy little ass in it, so now you have things to do where you can achieve fun, pursue and or your satisfaction, and so forth and so on. Like that's the whole purpose kind of a game is life without games is boring. I'm going to put you in a system where things suddenly get interesting. It'd be like you have the most boring life in the world, and suddenly somebody plucks you out of your chair and puts you in the middle of the jungle in like a death game with a bunch of other people. Your life went from boring as fuck to being really fucking interesting, really fucking quickly, all because the system in which you are currently boxed in suddenly shifted, right? Okay, moving on. Also part of human nature is our desire to make things easy. And this, of course, as I said before, isn't really the best thing in the world for us, in my personal opinion. Fun often does not come from things being easy because of this little word up here, satisfaction. Easy often does not mean satisfying. So, such is our conundrum in life. Remember, I talked about those desires that can be contradictory to each other by their very nature. That might very well be one of them. So, my point is that if you can greatly influence the behavior of the human animal, and subsequently the way they interact and experience the game, especially with the interact and experience their interactions with other human beings, God, that was hard to say, via the nature of the system that you're designing. The first thing you have to look at is how fucking hard is your game, right? And this is kind of a big deal because it's like, as it says here, human beings can always find ways to make games harder. Shout out to the Classic WoW hardcore community. They can always find ways to make a game harder. They can also do speedrunning. I find speedrunning to be perfectly stupid. I'll just say that right now in Classic WoW. I'm like, speedrunning, really? Why speedrun the instance when you could do it slow as fuck with 20 people? It would probably be harder, probably be funner, probably be more satisfying when you win. And the end and the cherry on that particular cake of doing like a 20-man Blackwing Lair or a 20-man AQ40 is you get twice the effective gear. Or more accurately, you get the same amount of gear rained on half the number of people. What the fuck are you doing speedrunning at 40 people? Like, I don't understand this meta. This meta makes no sense. Why wouldn't the meta be, we do 20-man Blackwing Lair? But maybe that's from like the, maybe that's a private server meta holdout when things were more difficult on the private server and you needed 40 people and they eventually went, oh, look how good we are at doing this really hard content with their speedrunning. I imagine that the meta will rapidly shift in Classic WoW from the, this is my prediction, the meta will very rapidly shift from it being speedrunning Blackwing Lair kills to it being doing 25 Blackwing Lair man runs. Much like Onyxia is like 20 people at this point rather than doing 40 like we used to do. That would be, for me, much more in line with human nature, where we're going to try to do things as easy as possible, and we're going to try to get as much satisfaction out of it as possible. So I don't know why the hell that meta is weird, but that's a bizarre tangent for me. Let's get back to it. So the first thing you want to look at is how fucking hard is your content? Because if you have meta issues, if people are literally demanding meta, which is option killer, if that's what's happening, if your fucking community is demanding meta, the option killer, they're fucking demanding it, then your game is probably too fucking hard. Like, just straight up, no joke, your game is probably too hard, and that's all there is to it. So that's number one, is difficulty. The other things that really influence player behavior are how easy it is to replace people, how easy it is to assess a person's value. Those two things kind of go hand in hand. what else do I really want to say? The point I'm really trying to make here is that it's not the human being that is the fuck up. It's the game designers are fucking it up. Because it's supposed to be a game designer's job to look into how their systems are going to how human beings are going to manifest under the conditions of the system that they are creating. Which tells me that when they fuck it up, they have very little concept of this. And they have very little concept of this. Like, so they don't really know the quicksand they're standing in until they start sinking into it. And once they start sinking into the quicksand, they can't really identify what the hell's going on. I was watching Kevin Jordan try to talk about it. I've been watching Asmon Gold for a while try to talk about it. I've been watching all kinds of people try to talk about it. And the entire time I'm sitting here going, am I a madman for thinking about it this way? Like, am I the crazy fucking guy? I like to think they know more than me. I like to think they know better than me. You think they would, but I just wanted to throw my hat into the ring on that. So, yeah, shout out to Jordan, or Kevin Jordan over there, whose content is quite good. I really like some of his insights. I've been watching some of his videos. This one with the balance was really fascinating, where, like, low performance, high performance, skill. We want things to be even, and little different metas and niches that form, and it got me thinking about a lot of things. Oh, right, I wanted to talk about muddying waters as far as game design in your game. So one of the better ways to muddy waters in a game is, again, don't have your game difficulty be set too high. Because the moment you set your game difficulty too high, people are going to start trying to figure out very, very intensely and very, very quickly what the meta is. Like, what are the best options to try to do this? Like, people, take Dark Souls, for example. People, I remember back in the day, people were getting their butts kicked by Dark Souls, and I can only imagine that people started data mining the shit out of that game for trying to figure out what the best tactics were. Never actually really played Dark Souls too much. Examples of good games that have stood the test of time with really muddy waters. Diablo 2 comes to mind. I'm very familiar with Diablo 2. Classic World of Warcraft also has really muddy waters in a lot of ways. You can see how many different metas came out when Classic World of Warcraft came out, like things we learned, things we didn't learn, things that we should have known back in the day that nobody tested, apparently, or people just kept the information to themselves. Hard to really say. Muddying waters. So I'm actually kind of second guessing my Muddied the Waters design concept for my personal game that I'm developing after watching Kevin Jordan's video here on game balance. Just because I guess I'm rambling at this point. My original thought on muddied game waters is the best way to balance a game is, rather than achieving perfect balance, and rather than achieving even a non-perfect balance, the goal should be, from my perspective, because this is where I've had the most fun in video games, and I'm very interested in what you guys think on this, is to have a game that nobody fucking knows what's good or bad. It's like, nobody's really quite sure what the hell is good. Nobody's really quite sure what the hell is bad. So, for example, I'll give you a prime example. So it'd be like, imagine a new player is asking some experienced players in a game, like, hey, what's better? Do I do this or do I do that? Do I do A or do I do B? And if the player base, let's think about it, retail WoW, a talent row, right? You got your three options, and God, don't get me started. Don't get me fucking started on the talents. You have your three talents in a row, and a new player is saying, hey guys, I want to raid, which of these three talents is better, right? If their response is, it doesn't matter which one you pick, just pick whichever one you want, there are only two reasons for this. The first reason is that there's only one reason for this. The one reason would be that they're clearly evenly balanced. But that could be in a good way or a bad way. Either they're evenly balanced in the fact that they're all shit, so it doesn't matter which one you're picking, or they're perfectly even balanced in their performance, and therefore your choice doesn't fucking matter, right? So, in my theory, in my brain, there's basically 3 options, right? So, option number 1 would be there is no choice. Everybody and their dog knows to pick option 3, right? Everybody knows, everybody and their dog knows that in this talent row, you pick option 3 because option 1 and option 2 are complete dog shit. Okay, that's option number 1. Option number 2 is that it doesn't matter what the hell you pick because they're either shit or they're perfectly evenly balanced. Okay, that's also kind of crap. The one that I always thought was the best and most fascinating is if I ask a player base, like a well-respected, well-known, high-skill level player base, what is better, A or B? And it immediately starts a debate, right? Like there is a fucking debate going on. And player 1 might tell you it's A, and player 2 might tell you it's B, and then finally you'll hear from the truth from an actual like player 3, and player 3 just tells you, look, dude, it varies significantly. It's nuanced is basically what they have to say. Like there are reasons to pick A and there are reasons to pick B, and nobody is really sure which is better, A or B. Just know that it's currently in hot debate which is better, A or B. In my brain, this is the state of muddied waters. When things are so unclear which is better, A or B or C, this to me is the ideal gaming state. Like the ideal state of balance is basically like nobody's really fucking sure which ones are better. And Kevin Jordan eventually goes into you got like the Frost Mage, and then you got like the Destruction Warlock. What is Shadow Bolt Warlock? Maybe. Anyways, so you got like the Frost Mage, and you got your Destruction Shadow Bolt Warlock, and yeah. So a primary example in classic World of Warcraft would be like, a Destruction Warlock can do more damage than a Frost Mage. However, Frost Mages are really, really good on long fights. Like, for example, Cthulhu is really, really good on a long fight. Whereas the Warlock, theoretically, the Warlock can be good in a long fight, but he's also kind of not good in a long fight in classic World of Warcraft because if your healers are otherwise taxed and or busy, then they can't really help the Warlock with his need for mana. And the Warlock might be a fucking idiot, and he might not deserve the mana anyways. Shout out to every Onyxia run that I've ever had that we get wiped because of the fucking Destro lock. What other little weird balances? Yeah, so I wanted to also talk about balance in a game, like, from a meta perspective. Personally, I'm a big fan of muddied water balance where nobody's really sure. So I thought for a long time maybe the best way to balance a game, and I still am not too sure on this. This is why I'm asking you guys. This is the best way to balance a game where I give my player base a bunch of options. I make them roughly equal around a Jedi curve. A Jedi curve is basically just a rough point of balance. So it would be like, in Hearthstone, for example, 1 mana, like the value of a card is X and the value of 1 mana point is Y. And whatever card we make in Hearthstone, the value of it, like the cost of it, should correspond directly to the value of a card and the value of 1 mana point. So, for example, a 1 mana card are kind of bullshit in just how powerful they are. Like, you spend 1 mana, you get like a 2/1 creature with like a special ability, like Death Rattle or some shit like that, right? And you're looking at that, and you're like, wow, that is really overpowered for 1 mana compared to everything else in the game that's like 1 mana. It's like I go up, like I spend 3 mana for like a 3/3 creature. This thing is a 2/1. And it it blows up and damages whatever attacked it for 1 damage when it dies. What the fuck is this? Well, the answer is that technically the 3/3 creature, or probably more like a 3/4 creature actually. The 3/4 creature is 1 mana or 3 mana and 1 card. And this other thing is 1 mana and 1 card. So you get the point. So you try to figure out like a the whole purpose of a Jedi curve is to try to keep everything roughly balanced on like a mathematical theoretical level, despite things being nuts. In classic World of Warcraft, that the Jedi curve would be itemization allowable points. So it'd be like, okay, this item is from Blackwing Lair, therefore it's got like a 72 item level. At 72 item level, you're allowed to have this much in stats. This is how we're valuing the stats. Like you're allowed, let's say you're allowed to have 100 stats on it at like 72 item level, right? And then you'll get all kinds of different variations of gear based around that Jedi curve. So the whole idea behind I was thinking about balance was like, okay, what if I have a Jedi curve to roughly keep things in line? Then what I do is I give my players all kinds of crazy shit to explore, right? So I'm making the waters pretty deep at this point. All right. Then and we didn't really touch on this again. This is another really big aspect. Making sure that you don't give players a lot of information, where ease of players accessing information. Yeah. Okay, so then not only do I give my player base a shit ton of options, like things they can do, like Diablo 2, for example, the prefix suffix system, and then all the unique items, and then all the fucking the talent tree, or the skill trees, and then all the different synergies from the skill trees, and then you got the fucking the rune words on top of that, and it's like, Jesus Christ, go fuck yourself. Path of Exile is also really good at doing this. I really making really making things really deep. Okay, so the depth of the waters would be how much stuff your players can do. And then the number one way to muddy the waters, in my personal opinion, is to try to give your player base as little fucking information about how everything works as is physically possible, and to try to make things work as kind of almost inconsistently as possible. Game programmers just naturally do this in and of themselves, so you don't even have to really do this as a game developer, but I just want you to be very aware of the concept, where it's like, if it's always predictable the way the math pans out. So for example, if every time it's like, say I have points in something, okay, say I got 3 things rolling. This is a good example. We'll do a World of Warcraft example. So say I've got armor damage reduction, and then I've got talent-based damage reduction, and then I've got like a buff-based damage of reduction. So I'm literally, we'll say it's Burning Crusade. I'm a paladin, so I'm in plate armor, and then I've got some talent points in my talent tree that are reducing my incoming damage by like 10%. Or Ardent Defender is active, like minus 35% or whatever. And then I've got like Blessing of Sanctuary on me, which reduces incoming damage by like 51. If it's always consistent in the game, like how the interactions between these damage reductions actually pan out, then that becomes quite predictable. However, if it's a bit of a shit show in your game, like how these things actually pan out or interact and work together, that can actually muddy the waters rather fascinatingly, and force a player base to dig deeper and deeper and deeper. So number one, don't tell your players fuck and shit all about how things work in the game. Like, I'm suggesting you don't tell them the hit points, you don't tell them the damage, you don't tell them the reload speed. You just go out of your way to try to give them as little information to work with as possible in as deep of waters as possible. And you'll end up in a situation where things are just really, really muddy for the player base. Like, they can't really pin down what the hell is good, what the hell is bad. And they should have quite the fascinating time exploring that and trying to figure things out. And personally, that's where I kind of have the most fun. The other thing that I think is really good to do, denying them information, I think it's also going to probably, since we're in the information age and a bunch of people are simming and we have a bunch of explorers and we have people who basically almost make a living exploring and trying to figure out the meta and so forth and so on. one of the better things to do as game designers going forward is going to be to intentionally try to make things as hard as fucking possible for these online YouTube and streamer psychopaths from figuring out definitively, from clearing out the waters of all the mud, from actually figuring out what is good, what is bad, what is not good, what is bad. So for me, everything starts with our Jedi curve. So I'm going to want everything to be pretty well close to each other, right? I don't want anything to be really standing out like way ahead of the pack saying, hey, look at me, I'm better. If we have anything like that, then it would be my job as like a game designer to kind of nerf that ever so slightly and nerf that ever so slightly again. Like no nerf hammer, just little chip away at it kind of a scenario until it gets back in line with everything else. And give them as little information as possible. So I'll give you an example of what I mean by chip away at it. So go back to our talent selection options, right? So say there are 3 talents in a row. 2 of them are about even, but 1 is so much better than all the others. Like, holy fuck, guys. It's like, yeah, we could debate between, A and B, but C, Jesus Christ, man. C is just fucking stupidly overpowered. Always take C. Well, as a game designer, I should be, as a game designer. As a game designer, I should be looking at that and going, okay, I should be nerfing C just a little bit. And then I'll see what happens with the player base. And the player base is like, yeah, they nerf C a little bit, but, it's still really good compared to A and B. Yeah, you can debate about A and B, but, C is still the best by far. All right, fine. And then I nerf it a little bit more. And like, fuck, they nerf C a little bit more. I want it to get to a point where, as I keep chipping away at the thing that's sticking out with the nerfs, eventually it gets back in line with the Jedi curve with the rest of the options, and I want that state of everybody's debating what is better. Like, they're not fucking sure. They're like, dude, I don't know which is better, Long Arm of the Law, or we get our old Burning Crusade fucking Judgment of Justice back again. Remember the Burning Crusade Judgment of Justice that did not allow your target to move faster than normal movement speed, right? So you imagine putting that shit on like a Demon Hunter or like a fucking a monk or some shit, and rather than them zipping all over the place, suddenly they're like, why am I moving normal speed now? This is fucking gay. They're like literally zip from point A to point B at normal speed. I would be laughing my ass off, and it's like, okay, Long Arm of the Law, or if you get a hold of these fuckers, they're not going anywhere for a while. Feel my pain, kind of a scenario. Let me think. I think Kevin Jordan here has very interesting observations on his perspective of how to balance a game. Where I'm sitting at in the information age, I think that we really need to have muddied waters in our game. We need to go out of our way to muddy those waters in the game. And we need to be a bit more religious about sticking to a Jedi curve so that we don't really know what is best. You can still have classes and variances. Like, there's a lot of little game mechanics in World of Warcraft, or that used to be in World of Warcraft, like Classic WoW that he brings up, like the threat mechanics and the mana efficiency mechanics, and like how easy or how hard your spec is to play mechanics, and different skill set type mechanics. And all right, so we're all this is under the umbrella of talking about the meta. Okay, so one really amazing way in a multi-class system to completely shit on the meta is just have people have buffs where they're like, it's like, let's say for the sake of example that paladins were complete and utter dog shit in classic World of Warcraft. Like, paladins were like the weakest healers in all of classic World of Warcraft. Ret is just fine. You can keep it the way it is, as basically dog shit from what I hear. And paladins are just terrible. They're fucking awful in raids. Doesn't matter. You're still bringing like 4 of them. You're still bringing 4 of them because you want all their blessings, and Blessing of Salvation is bullshit. You're still bringing 4 of the dog shit class because the blessing that they're bringing to the table is you can't fucking live without that. Another example of this, and again, you guys have probably all heard this elsewhere, whatever, would be like the priest. The priests could be dog shit in classic World of Warcraft, but if they're the only class with a bubble, and or they're the only class with a stam buff that they can give to everyone, then you're going to at least want to have like one priest. Ideally, the requirements would be more than one priest. And the point I'm basically trying to make here is that even in a world, how do I put this? Yeah. So in a world where you failed to do a Jedi curve, for whatever reason, maybe intentional game design, like intentionally this class is worse than this class, there are still other things you can do in the game where it's like, it doesn't matter if this thing is worse than this other class, it does shittier healing or does shittier DPS. You're going to be taking this class, and you're going to be taking this class in a fair few numbers into your raids, just because, they come with a buff. Like, it's literally that simple if your game design has failed in other aspects. Okay, so anyways, I think I'm done talking about that. I'm still really curious about game balance for game purposes. I can't get away from it. I think that a big problem in games these days is it's not so much an abundance of information. Information in a game is fine because you could make waters deep enough that, no matter, it's just fine. Is you can't give the player base easy access to certain kinds of information, or it will incentivize certain negative behavior like item scores and whatnot. For example, there's no reason why in Classic World of Warcraft we should be able to so easily see people's item scores. It also, I already talked about all this, so I guess I'll just shut up. Okay. Channel update. Let me think. Might have wanted to done this at the start of the video, but whatever. If you're not a fan of my channel for any other reason, you just stumbled upon this, you can just turn off this video right now. I'm just going to do a quick channel update. So channel update is Drakova. We're not doing any Pallycasts right now. I'll probably do a Pallycast with just Talrain. Maybe I'll bring on McConnell into the Pallycast. Might not. He might be a busy boy. Or might not even be confident engaging in the topic that we're going to be talking about. I want to do a Pallycast about helping people to get their Retribution Paladin Dreams online, especially with the AQ Avenger gears out and up. So we're going to be primarily focusing on not only what is BIS, but Ret and Ret Reckoning in general, as far as gearing is concerned, to help you guys out. Drakova is indisposed. He's currently painting. Oh God. He's painting fantasy elf miniatures and models and little houses and playing Warhammer Fantasy because he's a depressed boy from Classic World of Warcraft right now. He's a little depressed because he transferred off of Faralina to go rank. He got rank 12, but then he found out he couldn't come back to Faralina, so he was kind of stuck on a dead Alliance server because that's where he decided to go rank on. And he was trying to get a transfer to either Talrain server or back to Faralina so he could be with people that would actually back him up and give him gear. And then he finally got sick of that, and he's like, dude, I need to raid. I'm falling so far behind. So he transfers off of that, this is the story I was told anyways, transfers off of the server, goes to a different server, like, okay, I'm going to go raid on this server just because I can't raid on my current server. And like either that very day or the very next day, they reopened up transfers on Faralina. And apparently the combination of that just crushed his soul, and now he's playing fantasy for a little while. I am utterly convinced that Drakova will be back within like 3 weeks or so, just because I'm pretty sure he keeps popping on and off trying to see if his 2 month transfer restriction has ended yet, so he can start playing again. But I'm laughing my ass off. Technically, I'm really pissed off at him because he won't come. He's so He's so depressed, he won't join us in a fucking Pallycast. Ugh. Come on, bro. Help me out here. But anyways, other things I should have coming down the pipeline. Still working on dealing with rogues. Making significant headway in dealing with rogues. Been doing some really good rogues outside of Ogrimmar. I'm going to record me dueling some rogues, and I'm going to do a new rogue guide over the rogues once I figure out how to kill the rogues. I went from dying horribly to rogues like a bitch, to figuring out that Edward the Odd is OP as fuck, to using Edward the Odd versus rogues. So now I have like 10-minute duels with rogues where neither of us can kill each other, and the rogue has to run away at like 70% life, or I'll absolutely kill them. But I haven't figured out how to kill rogues that want to run at like 80% life. They want to run at 70% life. They want to run away at like 90% life. And they're holding all of their offensive cooldowns, like their blinds and their vanishes and just about anything else you can possibly think of, to ensure that they can effectively escape from me at this high life total without me kind of having any say in killing them. And what's really frustrating about it is if I pull the trigger and I try to kill these fucking rogues, like I use my grenades, I use my sapper charges, I use my trinkets, and I'm trying really hard to catch them and kill their ass, they'll just like blind me or vanish, or blind. They'll use their cooldowns to get the hell away. But then the next time they come back in, I'm suddenly without my tools again, because they come back in much faster. Not really true, but they'll come back in again, and suddenly I'm noticing that I don't have the offensive tools anymore. My bad. I don't have the defensive tools to not die to them. So we're in this really weird dance where I can't kill them and they can't kill me, and whoever goes for the kill first loses. But I think I figured out a solution potentially, so I'm gonna definitely look into that. Anyways, boys, day is fault, and hope this change of content doesn't bother you guys too much. I just wanted to really talk about what I think the meta is and human nature is, and where the basic errors are, what causes a meta, what causes the toxicity of the meta. What technically causes the toxicity of the meta is that the meta is essentially human behavior, and if the system is not incentivizing people to play nice with each other, and it's actually incentivizing people to not play nice with each other, well, then you're going to have a game where people don't have to be not dicks to each other. Look at any game with a toxic environment, a famous toxic environment like League of Legends. League of Legends has an extremely toxic environment. They try to do things to incentivize people to be nice to each other as opposed to complete fucking egotistical assholes, but it's still pretty famous, so it is what it is. Anyways, I'll end the video here, and yeah, good luck, boys.